On the group vacation I mostly paid for, she said. Stop complaining about the cost. If you can't afford to have fun, just leave. I replied, okay. I went back to the hotel, checked out, and flew home. Their fun ended when the group credit card I canceled was declined at their next hotel. I, 32M, never thought a vacation to Costa Rica would end my 5-year relationship and several friendships. But here we are. Looking back, the signs were there for months before we even boarded the plane. My girlfriend had been pushing for this elaborate group trip since January. 8 people total. Her, me, her sister's boyfriend, and 4 of her college friends. The destination kept changing. First it was Mexico, then Portugal, finally settling on Costa Rica because she saw some influencers post there. Each time the location changed, the budget went up. I should have backed out when she casually mentioned the cost had reached $12,000 per person. When I pointed out that was more than some people make in 4 months, she just shrugged and said her friends could afford it. So what was my problem? I made decent money as a software engineer, but dropping nearly $100,000 on a week-long vacation seemed insane. The planning meetings at our apartment became increasingly uncomfortable. Her friends would throw around ideas like private chef services, helicopter tours, and staying at some eco-resort that cost $800 a night per room. Every time I suggested more reasonable alternatives, I got looks like I had suggested we camp in a parking lot. The breaking point in planning came when her friends suggested we rent a yacht for 3 days. Not a small boat, a full luxury yacht with crew. When I calculated the additional cost would be another $15,000 per person, I finally spoke up. I told the group this was getting out of hand, and maybe we should consider scaling back. The silence in the room was deafening. Her sister was the first to break it, saying that if money was such an issue for me, maybe I should reconsider coming at all. My girlfriend jumped in quickly, not to defend me, but to assure everyone that we would make it work somehow. After everyone left, we had our first real fight about the trip. She accused me of trying to embarrass her in front of her friends. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's fun, but the costs had spiraled completely beyond what anyone had originally discussed. She told me her friends were successful and deserved nice things, and if I couldn't keep up, that said something about my priorities. I should have ended things right there. Instead, I agreed to cover not just my portion, but hers as well when it became clear her marketing job salary couldn't actually support her champagne tastes. Then her sister's boyfriend lost his job 2 weeks before departure. Guess who got asked to cover his portion too, just to keep the group together? By the time we were boarding the plane, I had quietly put nearly $40,000 on my credit card for this trip. My girlfriend knew the exact amount because she had helped me organize the payments. She thanked me with a kiss and promised it would be the best week of our lives. The first 3 days were actually pretty good. The resort was beautiful, the food was incredible, and despite the astronomical cost, I was starting to relax. The group dynamic was fine when everyone was happy and the drinks were flowing. The problem started on day 4 when we moved to the second resort, an even more expensive place closer to the adventure activities her friends wanted to do. The yacht her friend had insisted on was anchored in a nearby marina, and we were scheduled to spend the next 3 days living on it. That's when the extra charges started piling up. Premium alcohol packages on the yacht, spa treatments, shopping excursions to some artisan village where everything cost 10 times what it should. Her friends treated it like a game, seeing who could find the most expensive thing to buy. I watched my girlfriend purchase a handmade dress for $600 that she would probably never wear again. When I mentioned that seemed steep for something so impractical, she rolled her eyes and told me to stop being such an accountant about everything. The yacht portion was when things really went sideways. Her college friends, fueled by unlimited premium liquor, became increasingly obnoxious. They treated the crew like servants, made demands at all hours, and seemed to think throwing money around made them fascinating people. I found myself apologizing to the staff constantly for their behavior. When one of her friends snapped at a crew member for not bringing drinks fast enough, I quietly pulled the guy aside and gave him a significant tip while apologizing for the group. My girlfriend noticed me talking to the crew member and asked what that was about. When I explained, she told me I was being dramatic and that we were paying good money for service. I pointed out that we were guests on their boat and should act accordingly. She laughed and said that's exactly the kind of thinking that kept me from really enjoying nice things. Her friends overheard and started chiming in about how I needed to learn to live a little and stop being so uptight about money. The irony wasn't lost on me that the people telling me not to worry about money weren't the ones paying for any of this. The final day on the yacht was when everything fell apart. We had docked at some exclusive resort for lunch, and her friends decided they wanted to book spa treatments and shopping time there too. The resort coordinator quoted prices that would add another $3,000 per person to our already astronomical bill. When I suggested maybe we could skip the spa treatments since we had them available at our own resort, the group turned on me. Her sister's boyfriend, the one whose portion I was covering, told me I was ruining everyone's vibe with my constant penny pinching. I looked at my girlfriend, expecting her to say something, anything, to acknowledge that I had been incredibly generous with this entire trip. Instead, she avoided eye contact and started talking about which spa package looked most appealing. That's when I made the comment that set everything in motion. I said that maybe we should consider that some of us were spending more than others and perhaps be a little more mindful of additional expenses. The explosion was immediate. Her friend accused me of being manipulative and trying to control everyone with money. Her sister said I was being passive-aggressive, and if I had problems with the budget, I should have spoken up earlier. My girlfriend's face went red, and she told me I was embarrassing her. I tried to explain calmly that I wasn't trying to control anyone, but that I had covered significantly more than my share and was just asking for some consideration. That's when my girlfriend delivered the line that ended everything. She looked me directly in the eyes and said if I couldn't afford to have fun, maybe I should just leave instead of complaining constantly and ruining everyone else's experience. The group went quiet, waiting for my response. I could feel every eye on me. Part of me wanted to explode, to list exactly how much I had paid for their fun, to detail every expense I had covered while they acted like entitled tourists. Instead, I just said okay. I stood up from the restaurant table, walked back to the yacht, and gathered my belongings. The group was still at lunch, probably talking about what a buzzkill I was. I took a water taxi back to the mainland and caught a cab to our resort. At the hotel, I went to the front desk and explained that I needed to check out immediately due to a family emergency. I paid the early departure fees without argument. At this point, what was a few $100 more? I changed my flight to leave that evening and was at the airport within 3 hours of my girlfriend telling me to leave. During the cab ride, I made the calls that would turn their luxury vacation into a logistical nightmare. I canceled my credit card, the one that was linked to all their upcoming hotel reservations and activities. I called the yacht company and explained that due to unforeseen circumstances, I needed to cancel the remaining 2 days and would accept whatever cancellation penalties applied. Most importantly, I called my bank and had them flag any future charges from the group as unauthorized, since I was no longer part of the vacation and would not be approving any additional expenses. I didn't tell anyone what I had done. I simply boarded my flight home and turned off my phone. Update 1. I landed back home around midnight and finally turned my phone back on while waiting for my luggage. 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The first few messages were from my girlfriend asking where I had gone. Those quickly escalated to anger when she realized I had actually left the resort. Her friends had returned from lunch to find me gone, and apparently spent hours looking for me before someone at the front desk mentioned I had checked out. But the real panic didn't set in until later that evening when they tried to check into their next hotel. The reservation had been automatically canceled when my credit card was declined. The hotel, understanding that groups sometimes have payment issues, had held their rooms for 2 hours before releasing them to walk-in guests. By the time the group arrived, the hotel was fully booked, and with it being peak season, most places in the area were as well. They eventually found rooms at a budget hotel about an hour away from where they had planned to be, and from what I gathered from the increasingly frantic messages, it was quite a step down from what they had been expecting. The yacht situation was even messier. The company had a strict 48-hour cancellation policy, but since I had canceled within that window, I was only liable for 1 day's fee rather than the full 3 days. However, this left the group scrambling to find alternative accommodations for their last 2 nights. My girlfriend's messages went through several phases. First confusion, then anger, then attempts at manipulation, and finally desperate pleas for me to fix the situation. She alternated between calling me selfish and begging me to restore the credit card so they could salvage the rest of their trip. Her sister sent me a particularly nasty message calling me pathetic and saying I had ruined everyone's vacation over a petty argument. The irony of someone whose boyfriend's portion I had paid calling me pathetic wasn't lost on me. But the message that really stood out was from her sister's boyfriend himself. He had the audacity to demand I reinstate the credit card because, according to him, I had made a commitment to the group and backing out mid-trip was breach of that commitment. I sat in my own living room, surrounded by the silence I had paid $40,000 to escape, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. I drafted one message and sent it to the group chat. I was told that if I couldn't afford to have fun, I should leave. I left. You're all adults. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Then I blocked all of them and went to bed in my own house for the first time in a week. Update 2. The fallout continued for weeks after I returned. My girlfriend had apparently borrowed money from her parents to cover the group's remaining hotel costs and flights home. She showed up at my apartment the day after they returned, demanding we talk. She had clearly rehearsed her speech. She acknowledged that maybe the group had gotten carried away with spending, and that perhaps her comment about me leaving had been harsher than intended. But then she pivoted to how humiliated she felt, how her friends now thought I was controlling and vindictive, and how my actions had cost her family money and damaged her relationships. I listened to the entire speech without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her a simple question. At any point during the entire trip, had she acknowledged to anyone that I was paying for significantly more than my share? The answer was no. To her friends, I was just the buzzkill boyfriend who couldn't appreciate nice things and who threw a tantrum when asked to loosen up a little. She had never mentioned to anyone that I was covering her portion, her sister's boyfriend's portion, and most of the group activities. I told her that her humiliation was nothing compared to being told I should leave a vacation I had largely funded because I had the audacity to suggest the group show some financial awareness. She tried to argue that money shouldn't be used as a weapon in relationships, and I agreed. I told her that's exactly why I removed myself from the situation instead of holding my financial contribution over everyone's head. She left that day, and I never saw her again in person. But the story doesn't end there. About a month later, I started getting friend requests and messages from people I didn't recognize. It took me a while to realize what was happening. My ex-girlfriend had been telling her version of events to anyone who would listen, painting me as a controlling partner who abandoned his girlfriend and friends in a foreign country over money. Her narrative was that I had manipulated the entire group by offering to pay for things, then used that generosity to control their behavior and ultimately punish them when they didn't comply with my wishes. According to her version, I was financially abusive and had stranded them intentionally. The messages I was getting ranged from people calling me out for my behavior to others asking for my side of the story. I ignored most of them, but a few seemed genuinely curious about what had actually happened rather than just wanting to attack me. To those few, I simply said that I had been asked to leave, so I left. I didn't go into details about the finances or the group dynamics. I figured the truth would speak for itself. Update 3. 3 months after the Costa Rica disaster, I ran into her sister at a coffee shop near my office. The encounter was awkward, but she seemed different, less hostile than I expected. She told me she wanted to apologize for some of the things she had said during and after the trip. Apparently, in the weeks following their return, the full scope of my financial contribution had become clear to the group. Her boyfriend had finally admitted to everyone that I had covered his portion of the trip, and my ex-girlfriend had eventually acknowledged that I had paid for her share as well. The math wasn't hard for them to figure out after that. When they realized I had covered nearly half of the total trip cost while being told I was cheap and unsupportive, the group dynamic had shifted significantly. Her sister told me that her boyfriend had been incredibly embarrassed when he understood what had actually happened. The same person who had demanded I reinstate my credit card had been essentially freeloading the entire time while criticizing my attitude about money. My ex-girlfriend, according to her sister, had become defensive when confronted about the financial arrangements. She maintained that I should have been more direct about my contributions instead of letting people assume we were all paying equally. The group had apparently pointed out that she had actively participated in criticizing me for being cheap, while knowing full well I was bankrolling the vacation. Her sister admitted that the narrative my ex had been spreading about financial abuse and control hadn't held up once people knew the actual facts. It was hard to paint someone as manipulative for quietly covering expenses while being criticized for not spending enough. She said the friend group had essentially dissolved after the trip. The dynamics had been too damaged by the whole experience, and people felt uncomfortable about how everything had played out. Before leaving, she told me something that I found oddly satisfying. The expensive dress my ex-girlfriend had bought in Costa Rica, the $600 one I had commented on, had been returned to her parents' credit card the week after they got back home. Apparently, the financial reality of the trip had hit her pretty hard once the vacation high wore off. I thanked her for the apology and told her I hoped things worked out for everyone. I meant it mostly. I didn't wish anyone ill, but I also didn't regret my decision to leave when I did. 6 months later, I'm in a much better place. I've been dating someone new, someone who suggested we split the check on our first dinner and has never once expected me to pay for her friends' entertainment. It's amazing how refreshing it is to be with someone who views financial partnership as exactly that, a partnership. I still think about that moment in the restaurant sometimes, when my ex-girlfriend told me to leave if I couldn't afford to have fun. She was right, in a way. I couldn't afford to have fun the way she defined it. Not financially, but emotionally. I couldn't afford to be in a relationship where my contributions were invisible until they were gone, where generosity was expected but never acknowledged, and where expressing reasonable concerns made me the problem. The $40,000 was expensive, but it was worth it for the clarity it provided. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the most valuable ones. I learned that walking away from people who don't value your contributions isn't giving up, it's self-respect. And every time I look at my bank account now, slowly recovering from that expensive week in paradise, I'm reminded that the best investment I made wasn't in the vacation. It was in learning to value myself enough to leave when someone told me I wasn't worth the trouble. They were right about one thing. Their fun did end when my credit card was declined. But my peace of mind began the moment I said, okay, and walked away.